Welcome to the After Chat. I'm Michael.
I'm Ellis.
And today we are going to be talking about Joseph.
Yeah.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the After Chat. Real questions. Real talk. Real life.
All right, so what is a technology that you wish existed that would make your life easier?
You know, it's 2023, and everything I watched growing up had flying cars. And
Yeah.
I really thought we would have them by now.
Mm-hmm.
That, maybe it wouldn't make my life better. It would definitely make it cooler, though.
It would be a lot more
So
cool.
I'm going to go with flying cars.
You know, I want Star Trek instant travel. Like, I want to be able to be beamed from one point to another, just like at a whim.
Yeah.
Like, I spend, it's like 28 minutes for me to get to literally anywhere. So, like, if I could just be like,
Beam me up.
beam me to church,
Yep,
or
there you
beam
go.
me to the Food Lion store, or literally anywhere. Like, that would be, like, such a helpful thing.
That is more useful than a flying car.
Yeah.
You make
like,
a good point.
I
Yep.
definitely think so. But we're going to shift gears. Joseph was a creative guy, kind of. I mean, he had a coat. I mean, his dad made it for him. But,
cool
I
coat.
mean,
Yeah.
So what is your favorite form of creative expression?
Mine is definitely writing.
Yeah.
I process thoughts, just get things down from my brain onto paper, just in my spare time. Like that's my go-to. I was cleaning out my office recently, and I had notepads everywhere. I had like 8 of them, just in various places, because every time I think I need one, I go get another one. And so that's mine. Yeah.
No, most def. I'm kind of in that same vein. I like coming up with stories. I like creating characters and just start thought processing. Like, where are they going to go? What are they going to do? How are they going to react? Definitely, like, that's my thing that I like to do as well.
Nice.
So, all right. In that vein, who is the best fictional siblings?
There's some good contenders here. I feel like it's hard to overlook the Skywalker twins.
Okay.
Yeah. So Luke and Leia, I would put them up there.
Got a little weird.
Yeah, a little, I guess they weren't always siblings. Anyway, they ended up siblings, so they qualify for this question. I would also throw out Nebula and Gamora from the Marvel franchise. They're a pretty formidable duo.
I mean, they are. I don't know if they get along all that well, or they didn't for a while.
Yeah.
So, but yes. I mean, just as far as like family systems theory, like with them and Thanos, like
Maybe not.
There's
Maybe
a
not so good.
there's a lot to unpack. Mabel and Dipper Pines.
Okay.
Gravity Falls. I don't
Yeah.
know if you're familiar with that cartoon.
Yeah.
Love it. Absolutely love that cartoon.
It's a good pick.
My daughters and I have watched it probably 6 or 7 times. It's short, it's like 24, 25 episodes, but super fun, super exciting. There's always little mysteries. There's things to unpack and find in every episode. And, they've got a good-natured ribbing between the two of them, but they always have each other's back when things go sideways, and Bill Cipher comes and tries to take over the town. So definitely those two.
Good pick. I like that.
Yeah.
Under the radar, I feel like.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Do you dream? Joseph was a dreamer.
Yes.
He even gets that kind of thrown at him a little bit.
Yep.
We'll see what that dreamer has to say now. But do you dream in color?
Yes. It's funny because I don't dream often to begin with, and when I do, I cannot remember them. They have a very short shelf life in my brain. If I don't tell somebody about it by like mid-morning the next day, it's gone. Don't remember it. But I do dream in color when I do dream. That much I can remember. So there you go.
I think I dream in color. I don't always remember all of them, but I don't always remember, like what the environment was. So maybe I wonder what it would be like to have a vivid dream that you remember that's in black and white.
Yeah.
Like that would be kind of odd. I think. I think only if you find yourself in like a Mayberry or a Three Stooges cartoon or a show or something like where the memory that's prompting the dream is in black and white.
Right.
I don't think you would necessarily dream in color. You know?
Just a normal dream in
Yeah.
black and white.
I don't know.
That'd be interesting.
So I don't really know. I don't know. I found that kind of be an odd question. I don't know. I don't know where. I don't know where to go from there. So give us an outline of what we're doing.
Okay, we are going to talk about the story of Joseph because he's an interesting guy.
Yes.
A lot happens in a pretty short span of where we hear his story in the book of Genesis, and there's a lot we can learn from it and applies to our lives today. So that's what we're doing.
So we're going to kick it off. We're going to kind of break it down into a couple different settings. I mean, his whole story, I think, is like 20 plus chapters. Like it's a big read. We're getting kind of a 30,000 foot view of his story. We encourage everybody to spend some time in it. It kicks off in Genesis 37. So the section we're going to start out looking at here in the beginning is Joseph, where he has his first dream that kind of sets things off on a really sideways adventure until he finds himself eventually sold into slavery. So this picks up in Genesis 37, verse 3. But before we get there, Joseph was the 11th son of Jacob. So like when you hear Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, this is who, this is where he finds himself. He's the 11th son of Jacob. Jacob had 4 wives, 12 sons. Joseph was the 11th son in that family, and then there was also one sister in there. But Genesis 37:3. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe, but his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them, and they couldn't say a kind word to him.
Speaking of family systems,
yes,
yikes.
And I mean, and that was something that Jacob had experienced. Isaac, fathered both Jacob and Esau. Esau was Jacob's favorite. Their mom had, Jacob was their mother's favorite. Didn't work out well for either of them. Here we just see Jacob kind of repeating that same thing. So Joseph had this dream, and in verse 5 it goes to here. One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain, and suddenly my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. Here we go. And his brothers responded, so you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and the way he talked about them. It's one of those age-old lessons. It's not necessarily what you say, but how you say it. So soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. He just going right back to that well.
Yeah.
Listen, I have had another dream, he said. The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me. This time he told the dream to his father as well to his brothers, but his father scolded him. What kind of a dream is that, he asked. Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dream meant.
Joseph, some things are better left unsaid.
Yeah.
Bro, like, you didn't have to tell him the second time. Like, it didn't go well the first time. Maybe just leave that out the second time.
I mean, he's kind of arrogant, like his father, like he's his father's favorite. He's got a robe, like he's running around. Like I imagine everybody else is kind of shabbily dressed. And Joseph is running around looking sharp and swag, and all the things. So anyway, like his brothers go off, they're minding the sheep. And he decides he's going to go out there and go amongst them. And in verse 16 it goes, he's out there, he's looking for them, he's looking to find out where they are. He comes across this guy and he goes, I'm looking for my brothers, Joseph replied. Do you know where they are pasturing sheep? That jumped out to me based on our last conversation that we had where with the prodigal son.
Okay.
Joseph here, I put that in your pocket for a minute and just remember that Joseph's referring to them as his brothers. And his brothers see him coming, like the guy points out where they are, and his brothers see him coming in verse 18. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. Here comes the dreamer, they said. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him, and then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. So they started out, let's kill him. They kind of worked their way down a little bit to we're just going to fake his death and sell him into slavery.
Oh, brotherly love. Great.
I mean,
we love compromise.
I mean, it's on a sliding scale.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Grading on a curve, I see. All right. Cool.
So eventually, they sell him to some guys that are traveling to Egypt. And then the brothers killed a young goat in verse 31, 32. Then the brothers killed a young goat and dipped Joseph's robes in his blood. Then they sent the beautiful robe, now soaked in blood, to their father with this message. Look what we found. Doesn't this robe belong to your son? Like
only brothers. What is that? Come on.
But something that jumped out to me just based on our conversation about the prodigal son, how, the older brother kept referring to his younger brother, to his father. He kept always saying, like, referring to him as your son.
Yeah.
And the father kept referring to him as, nope, that's your brother. Mm-hmm. We kind of see that here. Joseph still is referring to him as like their brother, but they kind of separated, at least emotionally and in their mind. That's no longer our brother. Is this your son's? Like they put that wall between them.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure. For the record, just indulge me here.
Mm-hmm.
As we read on, or if you go read the story in its entirety, which we recommend, you'll see that Reuben, the oldest brother, is the only one who's a stand-up guy here. And
yes,
as an oldest brother myself, I just want to say, if the shoe fits,
yes.
Then, Anyways, okay.
No, I mean Reuben was like, no, let's just throw him in there, and then it says in there that he was going to secretly come back and try to help him out.
Yeah. There
like
you go.
I mean he didn't stand up in the moment, but like he had a plan, like So I mean, there's something to be said there.
Yeah, in his heart, he was a stand-up guy.
Yes.
The actual standing up.
Not so much.
Room for improvement. Yeah, there you go. So I'm going to pick up the story, mm-hmm. and we have some fun stuff where Joseph is sold to a guy named Potiphar. Mm-hmm. He's the captain of the Pharaoh's guard. And so he serves in Potiphar's house. Joseph ends up serving in Potiphar's house, which is a sign of like high honor for mm-hmm. a slave. Like only your top people are going to get to be in the house with you. And so he continues to gain Potiphar's trust until he eventually becomes Potiphar's right hand. He kind of rules or is responsible for everything that happens in Potiphar's house. This is in chapter 39, starting in verse 4. Joseph found favor in his eyes, Potiphar's eyes, and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. So, that sounds pretty good for Joseph, yeah.
Sounds good for Potiphar, too. Like, literally the only thing that he's worried about is, like, what do I want for dinner tonight?
It sounds like a win-win to me.
I mean, yeah. I mean, all things being equal, like, Joseph's got a pretty sweet deal,
mm-hmm. Pretty good. So the Bible describes Joseph as a well-built and handsome fellow, which, is good, until Potiphar's wife takes notice of those qualities. But Joseph's an honorable guy. He values this trust that he has built up with Potiphar, so he rejects her advances. But in verse 11, still in chapter 39, one day Joseph went to the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. She, Potiphar's wife, caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home, Potiphar, and then she told him this story. "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house."
I mean, he did exactly what he... there's elsewhere in the Psalms where it says, like, to literally flee from sin. Like, and that is what he dropped his cloak and just took off.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what you got to do.
Yep. I mean, he was just trying to do what he was supposed to do and ended up in a bad situation, and here we go. So, as you can imagine, Potiphar takes his wife's side and throws Joseph into prison.
Like, what's he going to do?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Potiphar, good call on that.
Yeah, I mean, what else is he going to do?
Yep.
Like, I mean, there's really, I mean, you can kind of see he didn't really have any other choice. Like,
Yeah.
he's going to take his wife's side.
Right. So he throws Joseph into prison. And while he's in prison, Joseph, as he tends to do, he's an honorable guy. He earns the favor of the prison warden. And so the warden puts him in charge of the other prisoners. He's kind of the chief prisoner, for lack of a better term. This brings us to an interesting story that happens when when Joseph is in prison. Two of Pharaoh's servants are put into prison at the same time, the cupbearer and the baker. When I was reading this, for some reason it came across to me like some kind of weird game show. So we're gonna read this like a game show. Okay, and we're gonna call it Joseph's Judgment.
There we go.
Alliterative. Nice. All right, so the cupbearer and the baker of the Pharaoh are brought to prison. Both of these guys have dreams, and Joseph interprets them, okay? So, we're going to start with the cupbearer. Here's the dream. It's a vine with 3 branches budding, and grapes are produced from that vine. Those grapes are squeezed into Pharaoh's cup, and the cup is placed in Pharaoh's hand. So, Joseph's judgment is the cupbearer would be restored to Pharaoh within 3 days. That's what the cup going back into Pharaoh's hand symbolizes. Him being restored, having favor with Pharaoh again. Okay, so then we go to the baker. Here's the baker's dream. There are 3 baskets full of bread for the Pharaoh, but birds are eating the bread. Joseph's judgment. The baker will be hanged within 3 days, and his flesh will be eaten by birds. Whoa.
No, I just imagine that like as a game show. Like, so like I just saw the cupbearer like being showered with cash and like you know, like doing like all excited and happy, and then like a wah 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 for the baker.
Or like the baker, it's time to interpret the baker's dream, and like all the lights just fade down and turn red. Like, oh, this is the elimination round. Oh boy. So
Poor guy.
So Joseph interprets the dreams, and they come true because this is Joseph's gift. He's good at this. And so that's where the story kind of ends, but plot twist. Because when Joseph interpreted the first dream, the cupbearer's dream, there was more to the story. So this is in chapter 4, verses 14 and 15. This is Joseph talking to the cupbearer. When all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. So then he interprets the baker's dream. This is all the way kind of towards the end of the story in verse 23. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. So Joseph interprets the cupbearer's dream correctly. Joseph says, hey, when you go to Pharaoh, let him know that I did this. And the cupbearer doesn't. And Joseph stays in jail.
I mean, Joseph has every reason to just be a bitter person.
Yeah.
Like, and if he was, like, everybody would just be like, yeah, I get it. Like, understandably so. Like, I mean, he gets... Yes, he was cocky as a boy, and you know, kind of rubbed folks the wrong way.
Aren't we
all the
all?
same,
Yeah.
aren't we all? Like, we all get a little grace for the things we do in our youth. Like, he didn't go out there and commit some terrible thing, and for his troubles, he got, you know, his death faked and sold off, and then, you know, he goes, he's doing good. Like, I mean, we can say, yeah, like, Potiphar didn't really have a choice. Like, I mean, he didn't know. Like, he didn't have, like, the context, and, like, we're seeing this from a third-person point of view. Like, we're seeing it, you know, on the outside looking in. So, I mean, yes, we can understand it, but at the same time, we're like, dude, you knew your wife was probably some sort of way.
Yeah.
You know?
Joseph's, like, simultaneously the guy who has all this favor and things always go his way and also can't catch a break.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Like, I mean, he's either cruising high or getting really brought down low.
Yep.
You know, every time he's on his way up, boom.
Yeah.
And so, and that's where we're going to pick up,
Yep.
you know, on the bottom side of him doing something awesome here. So 2 years go by.
Yeah.
And since Joseph had that interaction with the cupbearer and the baker, and both of those things came to happen, and while he was still in prison, like, word gets out of the Pharaoh having a dream. And so in Genesis 41, starting in verse 2, in his dream, this is what the Pharaoh saw. In his dream, he saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and begin grazing in the marsh grass. Then he saw 7 more cows come up behind them from the Nile, but these were scrawny and thin. These cows stood beside the fat cows on the riverbank. Then the scrawny, thin cows ate the 7 healthy, fat cows. At this point in the dream, Pharaoh woke up. I mean, it would wake me up. I'd be freaked out.
Yikes.
I'd be like, that was some weird, crazy things. And then carrying on. But he fell asleep again and had a second dream. This time he saw 7 heads of grain, plump and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were shriveled and withered by the east wind. Always the east wind. And these thin heads swallowed up the 7 plump, well-formed heads. Then Pharaoh woke up again and realized it was a dream. So, he's sitting there thinking, dang, this is crazy.
Now, do you think those dreams were in black and white or in color?
I think the first one was in black and white and the second one in color.
Okay.
I think we're going to split the difference there.
All right, cool. Yeah, we'll go with that. Anyways, continue.
So then the next morning, Pharaoh was very disturbed by the dreams. So he called for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, as one does. When Pharaoh told them his dreams, not one of them could tell him what they meant. Now,
Come on, guys.
That's a theme, because that happened with Nebuchadnezzar too.
Yeah, sure did.
So that's just kind of a motif that you see pop up elsewhere.
Y'all had one job. Come on.
And you got to interpret the dreams, bro.
Come on.
I mean, at least Pharaoh didn't go around and just decide, you know what? If none of y'all can get it, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, we're just going to start lopping people's heads.
Right.
So at least he's calling them in and telling them.
Yeah.
This is
valid. Progress.
Nebuchadnezzar could have learned a thing.
There you go.
But when Pharaoh told them his dreams, not one of them could tell him what they meant. And then carrying on in verse 9. Finally, the king's chief cupbearer spoke up. Like, if this was a movie and we saw the cupbearer sitting there and this happening, we would all know immediately was getting ready to happen. Today, I have been reminded of my failure, the cupbearer said. Some time ago, you were angry with the chief baker and me, and you imprisoned us in the palace of the captain of the guard. One night, the chief baker and I each had a dream, and each dream had its own meaning. There was a young Hebrew man with us in the prison who was a slave of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he told us what each of our dreams meant, and everything happened just as he had predicted. I was restored to my position as cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole. I mean, it makes you wonder what they did.
The Pharaoh was just angry with them.
I guess so.
Throw them in jail.
And then we're going to flip a coin and one's going to get out.
I'm picturing this like a movie scene. Pharaoh calls everybody in to interpret his dreams, and none of them can do it. The cupbearer knows someone who does, but he kind of has to rat himself out to do it. So there's I'm just picturing the slow zoom. There's a bead of sweat coming down his head. Am I going to say something? It's all dramatic and tense, and then he finally says it.
And he's like, excuse me, sir. The mousiest of voice. And everybody turning and looking at the cupbearer. And Pharaoh goes, come. This would have been a moment of high intrigue and drama.
Yes. Popcorn moment for sure.
Yes. So Pharaoh calls for Joseph. Joseph tells them that the dream means there's going to be a famine coming that would last 7 years, but before there would be 7 years of prosperity. So they needed to start prepping.
Doomsday prepping.
Yes.
There you go. Right there in the Bible.
Real deal right there. And then in chapter 42, the dream that kicked this whole thing off, way back in the beginning, the very first, the dream that started Joseph's whole adventure comes true. So chapter 42, verse 3. So now we're in the famine time. They've been storing up Egypt's been storing up all the food. Everybody in the region, if you want some victuals, you got to go down to Egypt. And so verse 3, so Joseph's 10 older brothers went down to Egypt to buy grain. But Jacob wouldn't let Joseph's younger brother Benjamin go with them for fear that some harm might come to him. So Jacob's sons arrived in Egypt along with everybody else to buy food, for the famine was in Canaan as well. So since Joseph was the governor of all Egypt, after Joseph interprets that dream, he gets a ring put on his finger, and he's made second in charge only to Pharaoh. He's the guy.
Yep.
So since Joseph was governor of all Egypt and in charge of selling grain to all the people, it was to him that his brothers came, and when they arrived, they bowed before him with their faces to the ground. And there it is. The climax of the whole thing finally comes right there.
Yeah. This is that full circle moment.
Yes.
These guys who started all of this for Joseph, here they are he's kind of, the roles have reversed. He's in a position of power.
Yes.
And they're at his mercy.
Yep.
Woo.
And that's where, and so after some time had passed, Joseph recognized them. They didn't recognize him. So after some, a little, like just some more kind of intrigue and drama, like he's, sticking silver cups in their bags of grain and sending them off and bringing them back and like dressing them down and all the things. Like there's some funny things in there. So please read it for yourself.
Yeah.
And then in Genesis 45, verse 4. So finally, Joseph's going to do like the big reveal.
Mm-hmm.
So then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." And when they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and no reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance."
Wow.
I love the thing that really jumped out to me on this reading was, and don't be angry with yourselves.
Yeah.
Like that's full, like, let it go. Don't beat yourselves up about this. Like, don't be ashamed. Like all of those things. Like don't be angry with yourselves for what you did.
Yeah.
Like that's a massive amount of grace.
Yeah. And that's, I think forgiveness and reconciliation are often interchanged or mistaken for one another. Forgiveness doesn't require anything from the other person. And so Joseph can give that to his brothers without being concerned about how they feel about it, to be honest.
Yes.
But to tell them, do not be angry with yourselves, it shows that not only does he forgive them, he cares about them and how they're feeling throughout this entire situation. And that's pretty cool.
And like God sent me here for this moment to save you and deliver you. Mm-hmm. And so eventually Joseph gets the whole fam moved over to Egypt.
Yep.
Them, the livestock, the little ones, the servants, the whole crew, and eventually Jacob dies, and then the brothers get worried. They're like, is he only keeping the peace just because Pops is still around, and now that he's out of the picture, like he's going to come down on us like, like a sack full of bricks. And so in Genesis 50, verse 18, his brothers then came and threw themselves, like he sent them a note, like the brothers sent Joseph a note saying, "Hey, like, are we all good? Like, is everything kosher?" And then he says, verse 18, his brothers then came and threw themselves down before them. "We are your slaves," he said. But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Contrast that. They never, back at the beginning, they never had a kind word to say. They're using that exact same language here.
Yeah.
And Joseph spoke kindly. That's something that I don't really think jumped out to me until like right now, like on that reading of it, because that's it all began with they never had a kind word to say about him. And here, like at this pinnacle moment where he could have gone either way, now that Jacob was there or Jacob was gone, like what is he going to do? He reassured them and spoke kindly to them.
Yeah. I always think it's funny how the brothers say they have a message from Jacob about how Joseph should forgive them. Where'd y'all get that from? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's not referenced beforehand.
Are you sure? But like from where Joseph's sitting, it really doesn't matter. Like it's irrelevant. So I just think it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, because he's already decided in his heart what he's going to do.
Right.
Like he told them that, like whenever they all came in, like hey, like he was happy to see them. Like he wept. Like go back and read all of it. Like he wept. Like he genuinely like was excited and happy to see them when he had every reason in the world. Like he could have sent them away. He could have done nothing. He could have brought, like his little brother Benjamin, like he could have brought him over and Pops and then just left like he could have done any number of things. Yeah. But he brought not just them, their servants, their families, their livestock, got them set up over in Goshen, which, I mean, could have been a pretty nice place, Yeah. And so he went above and beyond, like not just to offer forgiveness, because we've talked about this before. Like you can forgive and not reconcile. You can offer forgiveness, release everything in your heart and go your separate ways. Like that's not what he did here. Like he went far and above expectations of what probably anybody would have done in his place.
Yeah. And I mean, he had options too.
Yeah.
Like the obvious one is, he's in a position of power. He could have leveraged that power to take them out. The another option is they didn't even recognize him when they got there. It says that in there. So he could have. They weren't going to know who he was until he revealed himself to them. So he could have stayed anonymous and let them go on their way and made sure they never cross paths again.
Yeah.
So, but he didn't.
Nope. Well, we're going to pick up the next part of this after this clip.
Yeah.
So check out this message from Pastor Brian.
Because God never fails to use every situation, even evil, to cheat it of its corrupt intent. Joseph somehow understood this, and he refused to become the evil that had caused him so much harm. Instead, Joseph rose above his human circumstance, and he grabbed the perspective of God, one that knew that God was bigger and God was stronger than any evil coming against you. So whatever you're facing or whatever you're about to face, you can be sure of this. The power of God working in your life will overcome the power of evil pushing against your life if you will stand firm against it. No matter what the enemy means for evil, God will use for something good. We can believe that. We can know it. We can claim it.
I think what Brian, he did such a great job of wrapping that up. Whenever he referenced Genesis 50, starting verse 20, what Joseph said, like, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. It's really just about, a lot of it has to do with just our perspective and the way that we handle things when they don't go our way, or when somebody does go out of their way to deliberately hurt us, or just when circumstances just don't work out the way that we want, when there isn't like a single person. Like Joseph had like a series of people where he could look at and just say, you did this, you caused X, you caused X, you caused X, whether it be from ending up in slavery to what happened in Potiphar's house, and then him being in prison, and like all of these things. Like there's not always a individual that you can point at, but even you can take that point and make it bigger. Like if circumstances just don't work out that way, you can become justifiably bitter and angry, or you can look to see where God might be working in those things and still maintain your honor and integrity in your faith, that something good can come from it, even if you don't see it in the moment.
Yeah. I think Joseph, too, he consistently made that choice. I think it's easy for us, especially in a kind of 3,000-foot flyover like we're doing here. It's easy to see it like, oh, well, that's just the outlook he had. Like he made that choice once, and it stuck for the rest of the story. And that's just not. He would be the only person ever to be capable of that if that was the case. He consistently made that choice every time he ran into obstacles and things and people who did him wrong, and just he consistently made that choice, and that's hard.
Yeah.
That's a lot harder than it sounds just reading it in a story like this. But I think what he did is constantly keep it in front of him, of instead of being blinded by what evil is being done or what circumstances am I walking into that are harmful to me, he consistently kept it in front of him. How's God going to work through this and turn it for my good and not to harm me?
And he references that. He's like, I'm not going to be the one to tell you what your dream means, but God will tell you like what your dream means. Like he recognized like he was just a vessel for God to work through. Yeah. And, there's been times in my life where things didn't work out the way that I wanted them to. And that's true for you. That's true for everybody watching this. And like you said, it's a choice that you have to consistently make. Are you going to let your circumstances inform your faith, or are you going to let your faith inform your circumstances? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like one of those old sayings, like you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react.
Yes.
What are you going to do? What are you going to turn to? What are you going to plant your feet on the other side of, or in the face of whatever is coming your way? And,
Joseph, he always found a way, and this is what jumped out to me. Like he found meaning and purpose regardless of where he was. And, he had every reason to give in to despair, but he just didn't do it. He chose to try to make wherever he was better, and he added value to wherever he was. Like, he looked around and found ways to make himself useful to the benefit of everybody around him. And for that, you know, he just kept moving up and to the right. And then something would happen that was outside of his control. He'd get knocked down. And then whenever he was there, he'd look around and say, okay, where can I add value? How can I make not just my situation better, but make the situation better for everybody that I have around me? Yeah. And I think that's something, regardless of what you have going on or what happens, you can do that.
And that right there takes so much that we can aspire to have in our lives. It takes the ability to move past feelings of bitterness and say, okay, it happened. It's put me here. What am I going to do here to make this situation better? It takes humility because, you know, Joseph made it to some pretty important seats only to tumble from them and be back at the bottom. It takes some humility to be like, okay, I'm down here. How am I going to make this situation down here better, even though I was up there and I feel like I should still be up there? Like, there's so much in Joseph's story that we could sit here and unpack that can really apply to our lives daily. So,
and I think that's a perfect bow to put on this. I thought this was a good discussion.
Yeah, this was cool. I like this.
All right, guys, send us a review. We got a mug for you. And we look forward to seeing everybody here next week on the After Chat.
Thanks for joining us for the After Chat. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To be the first to hear our next episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button and get notifications for new content. You can also follow us on social media on Instagram at PCC Wired and Facebook at Passion Community Church. For additional resources and links, check out the description. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on The After Chat.